Lyra Hammond never once imagined that a life, built over nearly 9 years, could feel so small, so suffocating, and so borrowed. That was the only word her mind could find each morning as she moved, through routines that no longer felt like hers, in a house that wasn't shaped by her own tastes, under the gaze of a woman who believed authority was her birthright. Her mother-in-law, Edra, was a force of nature, one of those elegant, sharp-eyed women who could turn a compliment into a judgment without shifting tone, the kind of woman who knocked once for the sake of manners, then used the spare key she insisted on keeping. She had been entering Lyra's home freely for years, checking the curtains, the dust on shelves, the spices in the kitchen, always just making sure things are proper. Proper was Edra's entire personality. Lyra's husband, Rowan, once joked that his mother probably ironed her bed sheets and alphabetized her emotional breakdowns. But lately, Rowan wasn't joking about anything. In fact, he hardly spoke to Lyra at all anymore. His sweetness, the kind that had once come so naturally to him, had dried up the way a stream slowly disappears in drought. Not all at once, but little by little, in a way you don't notice until the ground cracks. The worst part? Lyra couldn't even pinpoint when it had started. She just knew that her marriage felt wrong, that Rowan felt wrong, that the attention he used to give her had been redirected elsewhere. She first noticed it in the receipts. A restaurant 30 minutes away from home, one they had never visited together. 2 entrees, a dessert he hated. Then there were the rideshare receipts at odd hours, rides that dropped him off at boutique hotels or upscale bars. But it was the rectangular smear of perfume on the collar of his beige coat, the wrong fragrance, too floral, too youthful, that made the truth impossible to ignore. Lyra wasn't naive, but she was tired, exhausted by hope, worn down by living in a house where she had to shrink herself to keep the peace. She had tried to confront Rowan twice. Both times he dismissed her with a cold, "You're imagining things. Lyra, maybe try focusing on things that matter." It was the cruelty in his tone that hurt more than the lie. He hadn't always been cruel. Before the arguments, before the distance, before the muttered comments about her infertility, Rowan had been her safe place. But as their years of trying and failing to conceive piled on, so did Edra's disapproval. It must be an issue on her side. Lyra once overheard Edra whisper to Rowan in the kitchen, as if her womb were a broken appliance. Lyra had learned to carry her grief privately. Quiet tears on bathroom tiles, silent apologies to a body she couldn't trust. She just hadn't realized Rowan had given up on her long before she'd given up on herself. One cold Thursday night, Lyra stood at the sink washing dishes when her phone rang. The unknown number almost went to voicemail, but something, a cold stab in her stomach, made her answer. A nurse's voice rushed through the line. "Is this Lyra Hammond?" "Yes," she whispered. "We have Rowan Hammond here at Crestfall Medical Center. He collapsed in a hotel lobby due to what appears to be a severe cardiac event. You're listed as his emergency contact. You should come immediately." Her fingers went numb. "Cardiac event? She's only 35, I understand. Please come as soon as you can." The world blurred. Lyra barely remembered the drive. She didn't remember what she said to the nurse at the front desk or how she ended up outside. Room 214. She only remembered the sight when she walked in. Rowan unconscious, his face pale, tubes running like tangled veins from machines to his arms. And beside him, standing too close, touching the bed rail like she had the right, was a young woman with glossy auburn hair and a round, pretty face. She looked up at Lyra with the kind of startled guilt that someone tries to hide by smiling. "Oh, you must be Lyra," she said. Lyra froze. "And you are?" The young woman placed a hand on her chest. "I'm Lissa, Rowan's fiancée." The hallway spun. "His what?" Lissa gave a small, sympathetic tilt of her head. "He was planning to tell you, eventually, but we didn't want to stress you. And I'm pregnant." Lyra's knees buckled, but she gripped the doorframe to keep herself upright. Pregnant. The word echoed like a slap. 2 minutes later, Edra swept into the room like a queen arriving at court. Her eyes landed on Lissa and softened instantly. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, embracing her. "I got your message. I came as quickly as I could." Then Edra turned to Lyra. The warmth vanished. "You shouldn't be here making this harder," Edra said, her voice dripping ice. "Lissa is carrying Rowan's child. That makes her family. We need to focus on what matters." Lyra's throat closed. "What matters?" Her husband was unconscious, dying, and his mother still found new ways to erase her. Rowan died 2 days later, just slipped away quietly, as if even his death didn't want to cause inconvenience. Lyra sat beside him through the night, but Lyssa got the first seat at the funeral. Edra insisted on it. She's the mother of his child, Idra repeated to every relative who questioned it. Lyra stood graveside, her grief a tight, trembling knot in her chest, while whispers circled around her. Lyssa openly complained of back pain, nausea, fatigue, as if competing for attention. At one point she leaned over and muttered to Lyra, "He wouldn't have looked twice at me if you could get pregnant, you know." Lyra didn't respond. She couldn't trust her voice, couldn't trust herself not to scream. The humiliation was unbearable. Edra's speech at the reception was worse. "It breaks my heart," she said loudly, "that Rowan never had children. A wife's duty is to continue the family line, and some people fail that duty. But Lyssa, sweet Lyssa, came into his life and gave him hope again." Lyra walked out before she could collapse. That night, her older brother Callum appeared at her door. Callum, with his calm voice and sharp instincts, traits that had carried him through 12 years as a police officer before he retired early, after a line-of-duty injury. He looked at her puffy eyes, at the way her hands shook. "Tell me everything," he said. She did. By the next morning, Callum had already begun digging. It didn't take long. Mason swore under his breath. Idra's face contorted. "Lyssa, tell me this is fake." But Lyssa wasn't looking at Edra. She was staring at Lyra. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "None of this would have happened if you'd just stayed out of it. Rowan should have left you years ago." TJ laughed darkly. "He wasn't leaving anyone. She scammed him, just like she scammed me." Callum slid a document toward Lyssa. "Divorce papers. TJ wants you out of his life. Sign them." With the entire room watching, Lyssa's bravado collapsed. Her hands shook as she scribbled her signature. Then she fled so fast she nearly tripped over the rug. Silence settled, heavy and awkward. Mason was the first to speak. "Lyra, I'm so sorry. None of us should have. We didn't know." Even Edra, proud, rigid Idra, turned to Lyra. Her eyes were rimmed with something unfamiliar. Shame. "I owe you an apology," she forced out. "For many things." Lyra nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It would take time. But for the first time in years, Edra's gaze no longer cut her down. It simply regarded her as human. Life slowly began to settle after that. Lyra spent her days cleaning out Rowan's things, rediscovering her own tastes, her own preferences, her own air. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the start of something that felt like it. Weeks passed. Then one morning, Lyra woke with a strange sense of heaviness, an odd mix of nausea and warmth. She chalked it up to stress until she noticed her period was late. Very late. Her hands trembled as she held the test in the bathroom, watching the screen blink. Then the word appeared. Pregnant. Lyra sank to the floor. After years of appointments, tears, failed treatments, and cruel comments. After betrayal and heartbreak. And loss. Her body had finally whispered yes. Rowan was gone. Their marriage had been a battlefield in the end. But this one thing he left behind, it was good. It was hers. Lyra pressed a trembling hand to her stomach and felt a warm, fragile smile grow for the first time in years. She whispered, "We're going to be okay." And she finally believed it. 5 days after the funeral, Lyra sat in her living room facing Lyssa, Edra, Rowan's cousin Mason, and several of Rowan's friends. Idra had insisted Lyssa come over to discuss the estate and the baby's future. Callum stepped inside last, and behind him walked a man Lyra had never seen. A tall man with tattoos running down his arms and anger sharp enough to cut glass. Lyssa's face drained of color. "TJ?" she whispered. Callum nodded. "TJ Vargas, Lyssa's actual husband." Gasps erupted. Lyra stared. Her husband? TJ tossed a folder of documents onto the coffee table. Marriage certificate, joint financial accounts, photos. Then he played a voice recording on his phone. In it, Lyssa's voice chirped, "I'm going to bleed his family dry, babe. He thinks I'm pregnant. They'll pay anything to protect their precious Hammond legacy." Lyra didn't tell anyone about the pregnancy for the first 2 weeks. Not Callum, not her best friend Mira, not even her doctor. She held the secret, like a tiny glowing ember cupped between trembling hands, something too fragile to expose, too precious to risk letting the wind touch. She wanted to keep it safe a little longer, to savor the feeling before the world inevitably changed around her. It was surprising how grief and hope could coexist. Some mornings she still woke reaching for Rowan's side of the bed out of habit, only to remember he was buried on a hillside overlooking the old Cedar River. Other mornings she sat on the edge of the bathtub, palm resting against her flat stomach, imagining the future with someone she had never met, someone completely untainted by lies and affairs and the Hammond family legacy, someone innocent. Her heart softened in places she didn't realize had gone hard. But the world didn't pause for Lyra's new reality. Life continued challenging her in the ways she had always feared it would. The first test came when she visited the estate lawyer 3 weeks after discovering the pregnancy. He had summoned her to finalize paperwork regarding Rowan's assets, investments, and the lake cabin his family owned jointly. Lyra sat in a leather chair across from August Hale, a tall, silver-haired man with the kind of expression that conveyed both wisdom and a strict adherence to protocol. He adjusted his glasses, skimming through the last page of the file. "Mrs. Hammond," he said, voice calm but firm, "I must inform you that Rowan's will was updated 3 months before his passing." Lyra stiffened. 3 months ago was around the same time he had grown cold, secretive, cruel. Her stomach knotted. "Updated? How?" she asked quietly. August folded his hands. "He removed you as his primary beneficiary. He assigned his mother, Edra, to oversee the estate, including the cabin, the accounts, and the investments. He left you, the house and his vehicle." Lyra blinked. Just the house, just the car. Everything else, everything they had built, saved, invested in over 8 years of marriage, went to Edra. Of course it did. Her throat tightened, but she kept her face neutral. "Is there anything I can contest?" she asked. August gave her a sympathetic look. "Legally, no. A will updated and signed of his own free will is binding." "I'm sorry." Lyra nodded stiffly. It wasn't the money she cared about. It was the meaning. Rowan had chosen to erase her, even before his death. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal or the confirmation that he had stopped caring long before she realized it. When Lyra left the office, she found Edra waiting on the bench outside, hands folded in her lap, posture straight as steel. Lyra sighed internally. "Did you follow me here?" "I had an appointment with August before yours," Edra replied, though her tone betrayed that she had been waiting intentionally. "I thought we should talk." Lyra remained standing. Idra cleared her throat. "What happened after Rowan died? The things I said, the way I treated you was wrong. That alone was a seismic shift." Idra Hammond did not apologize. She did not backtrack. She did not soften. Yet here she was. "I let my grief twist my thinking," Edra continued. "I blamed you because it was easier than facing the truth about my son." Lyra swallowed but said nothing. "I've been going through his things," Edra said softly. "His journals, his messages. I knew Rowan could be thoughtless, but I didn't know." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know he could be cruel." Lyra's chest tightened again, not for Rowan this time, but for her own heart that had borne the scars of his slow transformation. Idra rose slowly from the bench. "I can't fix the past," she whispered. "And I know I don't deserve forgiveness right now. But I am sorry." Lyra wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe defiance. Maybe denial. But not this raw, trembling honesty. She let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said softly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. They stood in silence until Edra asked, "If you ever need support, Lyra, you can come to me." Lyra nodded politely and turned to leave. As she walked away, Edra called after her, "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Lyra didn't respond, but she felt the words settle inside her like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples she wasn't ready to look at yet. Over the next 2 months, Lyra's life changed steadily, quietly. Her symptoms grew, nausea, fatigue, dizzy spells, but her hope grew with them. She finally scheduled her first doctor's appointment at the Crestfall Women's Clinic. Callum insisted on driving her. When they entered the exam room, Lyra's nerves shook beneath her skin like autumn leaves in wind. A decade of disappointment had carved caution into her bones. The ultrasound gel was cold. The doctor, a gentle-eyed woman named Dr. Fay, moved the wand carefully. Then the screen flickered. A small shape appeared, a pulsing spark at its center. There, Dr. Fay whispered, smiling. That's the heartbeat. The sound filled the room, a rapid, fluttering rhythm that felt both foreign and intimately connected to her soul. Lyra covered her mouth with her hands as tears spilled down her cheeks. Callum silently gripped her shoulder. It's real, Lyra whispered. Dr. Fay nodded. Your baby is healthy and developing beautifully. Beautifully. The word wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. When they left the clinic, Callum nudged her. So, when are you telling everyone? Not yet, she said with a small smile. Maybe after the next checkup. He accepted that. Lyra wanted it to be a quiet joy a little longer. The second challenge came 6 weeks later, when Rowan's cousin Mason invited her to a family gathering. It's just a dinner, he said over the phone. Everyone's been reflecting, and I think they want to try again. With you. Lyra hesitated. The Hammonds had been her family for nearly a decade. They had embraced her at first, adored her even, until the pressure of her infertility turned their acceptance conditional, brittle, judgmental. She wasn't sure she could face them again, but she also knew she needed closure. So she went. The dinner was held at Mason's home, a warm, rustic cabin overlooking a sloping meadow. The atmosphere was gentler than she expected. People greeted her with soft smiles, tentative but sincere. Edra was there, sitting near the fireplace. She looked smaller than Lyra remembered, as if grief had carved pieces out of her. When their eyes met, Edra stood. Lyra, she said quietly. Thank you for coming. Lyra offered a nod. Thank you for inviting me. Throughout dinner, people apologized in subtle ways, asking about her job, complimenting her new haircut, making space for her in conversations. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt like a slow, careful rebuilding. Then halfway through dessert, Mason cleared his throat. There's something I want to say, he announced. Everyone turned. Mason stood, holding a glass of water as if it were a toast. We treated Lyra horribly, he said honestly. We believed lies because it was easier than questioning. Rowan. We judged her for circumstances she couldn't control, and we forgot she was family. Lyra's chest tightened. We can't undo the past, Mason continued, but I hope we can do better in the future. People murmured in agreement. Edra rose slowly. She faced Lyra with trembling hands. I want you to know, she said, voice unsteady, that you don't owe us anything. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, nothing, but I would like to be worthy of your presence in this family again. Lyra blinked back tears. I don't know what the future looks like, she admitted, but I'm willing to... See? Idra nodded, relief softening her face. The moment felt like the first real step in healing. 2 weeks later, Lyra fainted while grocery shopping. A stranger helped her to a bench and gave her water while the world tilted sickeningly. As soon as she could stand, she called Callum, who arrived in 5 minutes flat and insisted on taking her to the clinic. Dr. Fay ran tests, checked vitals, examined everything thoroughly. Then she broke into a bright smile. Lyra, everything is perfectly fine. Your iron levels are low, which explains the fainting. But your baby is strong and right on track. Lyra exhaled shakily. Dr. Fay added, and I think it's time to start sharing the news. Stress is harder when carried alone. Lyra nodded. She knew she was right. The next morning, she invited Edra, Mason, and a few of Rowan's other relatives over for tea. Callum joined her, partly for support, and partly because he didn't trust half the family yet. Edra entered last. She moved cautiously, as if unsure whether she belonged. Lyra took a deep breath. There's something I want to tell you all, she said, placing her hands gently over her abdomen. I'm pregnant. Silence fell. Then Edra's hand flew to her mouth. Mason's eyes widened in shock. Callum grinned, rubbing his hands together. She's 6 months into her redemption arc, he joked. Lyra laughed weakly. I found out about 2 months after Rowan passed away. Idra's knees buckled and Mason caught her arm. Edra choked. You're having Rowan's child? Lyra nodded. A sob tore from Edra's throat. Then another. She sank onto the couch, crying openly, messily, in a way Lyra had never seen. When she finally could speak, Edra whispered, Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance to love someone from him. Lyra's eyes stung, but she nodded. This baby isn't a replacement for Rowan. But they are a part of him. And part of me, and whatever family we build around them. I want it to be healthy. Idra nodded through tears. I will follow your lead. Whatever you want, however you want it. Lyra believed her. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lyra's belly blossomed. Her body transformed. Her life slowly, steadily rebuilt itself. Idra visited weekly, bringing soups, fruit, and knitted blankets she worked on in the quiet hours of dawn. They talked, not about Rowan, not at first, but about simple things, flowers, music, baby names. Building a new relationship from scratch. One mild spring afternoon, Lyra sat on the porch of her home, now truly hers, with a cup of herbal tea. The sun warmed her skin, and the air smelled of citrus and pine. Callum arrived with groceries and sat beside her. You look peaceful, he said. For the first time in years, I am. He nodded. You deserve it. Lyra placed a hand on her belly as the baby kicked softly. I never thought I'd get here. But you did, Callum said. You walked through hell and came out with hope. Lyra smiled, her eyes drifting toward the horizon. This baby, she whispered, is the one good thing Rowan ever left me. Maybe the only pure thing in all of it. Callum nudged her shoulder gently. And you get to shape the rest. Without him, without Edra's control, without lies, Lyra nodded. Her future felt bright, not because of Rowan, not because of the Hammonds, but because of the life growing inside her. A new beginning built not on expectation or obligation, but on love, real love. The baby arrived on a warm summer night, with a cry that filled the delivery room like a rising sun. A girl, tiny, soft, perfect. Lyra held her close, tears sliding down her cheeks as the newborn curled small fingers around her own. Hello, little one, Lyra whispered. I'm your mom. The nurse asked gently, Do you have a name in mind? Lyra looked down at her daughter's bright, curious eyes. Nova, she said. Her name is Nova. Callum burst into tears. Edra, waiting outside the room, cried too, loudly, messily, when she held her first grandchild. But the moment belonged to Lyra. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the grief, none of it defined her anymore. She had reclaimed her life, rebuilt her world, and filled it with something pure. Nova Hammond, a new beginning, a new story. Lyra kissed the top of her daughter's tiny head. For the first time in many, many years, she smiled with her whole heart, and the smile stayed.